I used to measure the success of my relationships of if it was going to end in marriage or
Mm.
not. And if it wasn't ending in marriage, then I failed.
A lot of people think that once they are not actively grieving a heartbreak anymore, it's complete. But there is often more to uncover as we go through our journey.
The worst thing that you can do is prolong your stay in the messy middle.
It was not love. It was definitely attachment and fear.
Mhm.
And those things are different.
It's easier and more immature to end a breakup with fuck them.
Welcome to the Well Worship Man podcast, where men come to build unshakable presence, become the rock in their relationships, and build a legacy that lasts beyond their years. Here, we explore the path to mature masculinity through humble power, daily devotion, and unwavering integrity.
Thanks, baby. Today on the show, well, before we get started, if you haven't already, make sure that you follow the show, you leave a review and a rating. It really helps the podcast grow and for these conversations to reach more of the people that need it. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about breakups. And we actually recorded this podcast already once and we didn't like it because we want to bring the best conversations to you. So here we are in my childhood home, re recording our episode on breakups.
Yeah. And, that first time we recorded through this, it seemed like maybe there was a little bit more about our breakups that needed to be processed
Hmm.
internally.
Yeah, totally. Part of what we work on is sharing from the scar and not the wound. And I think maybe on that first conversation, some of the wounds were still open. So it allowed us to heal a bit, but it's not a conversation that we're going to share. But this one we will share. And maybe some of you listening still have some wounds from breakups, recent or long gone. And hopefully this conversation helps the audience heal a little bit or see with new eyes.
Well, I think that is like the perfect way to set up this conversation is a lot of people think that once they are not actively grieving a heartbreak anymore, it's complete. But the way that life and healing and evolution actually works is that there is often more to uncover as we go through our journey. And so maybe you are quote unquote healed from a breakup or a heartache. And also, maybe that wound has a little bit more to teach you. And there's always more to be learned, from every new perspective. So, with that being said, I was thinking maybe we could start off with sharing a little bit about our first heartbreaks.
Yeah, I'll share about mine. And I want to tap into something that came up
Mm,
while you were just speaking
mhm,
is that it's easier and more immature to end a breakup with fuck them. I'm going to
mm,
forget about them completely. I'm going to pretend like it never happened, like none of the good in that relationship ever happened, that I didn't learn anything, that they're just a zero of a person. But the more mature and the harder thing to do is actually to honor the relationship, to understand what you did learn and are still learning from that relationship and the beautiful things that were there as well. And that can be really tough.
The truth is that no healing is ever really complete until emotions of compassion and gratitude have been reached for ourselves in the process and also for the other person. And so that place in, the breakup process that you're talking about where there's only anger and there's only aversion to even thinking about it is barely step 1, you
Hmm.
know? It's really step -1, like, before the process even starts, and that is, I think, a good gold standard to just offer is if you don't feel deep compassion for the other person that you were in partnership with, if you don't feel deep compassion for yourself at that phase of your life, and if you don't feel gratitude for the entire experience, then there's something more.
And there's an understanding that that person will always be with you,
Mhm.
that they did leave a mark on you. And that's really honoring the relationship, not like they never meant anything. to me, like I've let go. It's not no, like letting go is actually understanding the imprint, the fingerprints that they did leave and being able to move on without any of that emotional charge that comes from that like fuck them. That's still a form of clinging.
Totally. There is I don't really know the correct term, but a theory or a law, I'm actually not sure which one it is, but called quantum entanglement, which says that after any two particles touch, they're essentially forever intertwined. Like they will always be impacted. And, if we are two particles and we touch and then you're across the world and something happens to you, I'm impacted in some way. And that allows us to really honor, I can't unwind the truth that I have interacted with all of these lovers and friends and whoever that maybe resulted in pain in the end, but we're forever connected in some way
Mhm.
because there has been love at some point. And
Yeah.
if in truth there's love eternally, even if it shifts.
Yeah, and it especially leaves impacts in the subsequent relationships that you've had. In all my prior relationships, they've taught me things that allow me to love you better in this relationship.
Mhm.
And so, running the tape back to the very first heartbreak, I was 15 ish. I was 15. And there was a girl who was a year older than me. Man, I'm like, which heartbreak was first? I'll keep on this thread. I'll share the other one too. She was a year older than me, and we were vibing. We had a class together, and me and my friend Tyler and her and one of her friends. It was like the four of us, like in this class, just like having a great time, like being flirty, da 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 da. And this woman had, she's a girl at the time. She was 16. This girl had a boyfriend, and I knew that she liked me. I knew that I liked her, but there was always this barrier of like she has a boyfriend, and it's something that she acknowledged too. But she would like break up with her, and then he would come to me, and I would think that we were about to get rolling, and then he would go back to her, and she would take him back, and this like cycle repeated a few times, and it was like really tragic to the point that I recorded a diss song about her. I was a rapper in high school, and I recorded a diss song about her, and I remember like one night, I don't know, we were at somebody's house. It wasn't like a party or anything. And she was like trying to connect with me. She even tried to like pull me into the bathroom at one point to give me a little action. And I was just like so dead to it. I was just like, I can't. Like at this point, it's just like this cycle is repeated so much that I'm just like out. Like I wish it could have been, but I'm just out on it. So that was one in high school. And then the other in high school was this girl. She was my best friend. And I was also in love with her, in teenage love with her. And I told her that multiple times, and she told me multiple times over years, like 3 years, that she had no interest in me romantically, and that like hurt for the whole time.
What does or what did teenage heartbreak feel like to you?
I remember one night after getting a text from the first girl that I mentioned, that she was getting back together with her boyfriend. I just was like in my bed, like pounding my pillows, like through tears, just like it felt like it was like shredding me apart. I think it feels like I don't know that that experience like changes all that much as you grow. Like heartbreak just like sucks. It feels like it overcomes you.
Mhm.
It feels like it's bigger than you. And I think now at my level of maturity, I understand that my emotions are never bigger than me because I'm the one having them.
Mhm.
But as a teenager, I didn't have that awareness. So I think it was like even harder then because you have less perspective and you have less points of reference.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't really have a teenage heartbreak. Like, there were people that I had crushes on, and I dated someone in high school that cheated on me. But even when that happened, I was like, okay, no, like, I was really just clear and that was not for me or about me. And then I think through college, my, I don't know, confidence or clarity on who I was and what I deserve continued to fade because of some stuff that I went through. And so I wouldn't really say that my heart was broken until I was 26, 27. It was the first person that I ever said I love you to. And I, like, the world was ending. Everything was dark. Like, when I think about that time in my life, I would go to work. I would cry in the bathroom. It was cold. It was like winter time in Philadelphia. So, like, the energy of the world was also dark. And then I would go home to my single person apartment that I lived in that was kind of old, and I would just be in the dark. And even before that, when we were sort of breaking up and I was actually living in his dad's attic at the time. And it was just dark and cold and lonely. And I didn't want to talk to anyone because I didn't want to share what I was going through because I also felt shame for being left. And I remember he used to say, you just haven't had your heart broken before, so you don't know it, but you will get to the other side of this. Like, this is what the first one always feels like. And I was like, no way. Like, I am going to die. Like, please let this car hit me. That's the first time I ever had that thought in my life. I was like, please, just, I'm not going to do anything scary, but if this car hits me, like, everything would be better off. And that same, like, feeling like it was so much, I only had unhealthy tools at the time.
Yeah.
So it really felt like the emotion was bigger than me. It really felt like it was going to be like that forever. It was probably my first experience of personal grief instead of, like, you know, two people away from me grief.
Hmm.
And grief is really all consuming.
Hmm.
So that was my first heartbreak. I had, like, unexplained back pain. I just, like, woke up one morning and literally could not move my body on my probably 27th birthday and got sent home from work. Like, there was also physical manifestations of the fact that my emotions were way too big for me and insurmountable. And I don't know, it sounds like maybe your experience was a little bit different, but, well, I think maybe just by the end you were able to create some clarity. But this feeling of, like, not wanting to feel the pain and going back to the person was really alive in that heartbreak for me.
Yeah. So there's a couple experiences that you had. Well, first, I want to know what music you were listening to at that time.
Whatever I was listening to, it was on repeat for sure. And I was watching reality TV.
Okay.
Like, I rewatched the OC. And I remember texting my really good friend from high school that we used to watch the OC together. And I was like, what do I watch when I'm, like, still unwell?
Hmm.
And the OC is done.
Hmm.
And she, like, pointed me in the direction of some reality TV that got me through it.
Great. You gotta get through it anyway you know how. And there's something in my experience that I want to come back to, but I have a couple things that I want to ask you about yours, which are experiences that everybody has in a breakup. One is, I'm never going to emerge from this. I'm going to die, as you put it. And two, this desire to get back with that person. So let's start with one, and then maybe we'll come to me, and then we'll go back to this. So, knowing what you know now as a mature woman that you are, what do you know about that time period after a breakup when someone is really believing that they're never going to emerge from it? What would you share with someone who's in that period?
I'd probably share a similar thing that ex-partner shared with me is this just feels this way because it's the first time you're experiencing it.
Mm,
But I would explain the shamanic way of life, which is, we live and die many times before we die a physical death as humans. And this is just your first death of this fashion. So you don't have the data that you're going to make it to the other side, but you will. And once you have that data, then you'll know in the future that you also will. So I think that that is just that's just a learned experience. Life, you can read all of the books in the world, but until you go through the actual process, you don't really have the embodiment of it, and you can have, like, I had like little crushes in middle school and high school, but the first real heartbreak is completely different. It lasts. And so that feeling of it's never ending feels true because it's probably the longest experience of grief that you felt. And yet the way of life is that after every contracture comes an expansion. So I talk, this goes into grief teaching a little bit, but I talk to my clients who are grieving something about, like, well, what's the legacy of this loss? Is this breakup or is this loss of this life going to be for nothing? Or can they have a legacy for you? And the legacy of that heartbreak for me was the first piece of my spiritual awakening outside of the religious processes that I went through that we talked about in our spirituality podcast. It was what brought me to the power of now and like those types of things. So that was his legacy for me, which is beautiful to think of.
And if you're going through that, just watch as much reality TV as you can.
Well, to your point, I know you're kind of kidding. And also, I had a mentor one time where I went through a completely different type of death. And it was horrible. But I shared with her, I just can't this was later in life. So I was talking to her about, I just can't pray, like I just can't meditate. Like it is way too overwhelming for me to close my eyes
Mm,
because everything with my eyes closed is so dark.
mhm.
And she was like, dissociating all of the time to something like Netflix or reality TV or your phone is not good. It's completely unintentional and subconscious and a useless coping strategy. But when you know that those things are tools in your toolbox, then it's like, okay, maybe I actually can't sit with this grief anymore today. And I actually can intentionally tell myself, like, I'm going to watch reality TV. And that's a gift that I'm giving to myself because I need a break. And then tomorrow I can feel a little bit more. And then maybe over time I watch a little bit less of Vanderpump Rules or One Tree Hill or whatever I'm watching,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a good point.
yeah. A pint of ice cream, some reality TV, those things are actually beneficial in the right dose,
Mhm.
in moderation.
Yeah. What would you tell that version of yourself?
Oh man, lean in.
Mm.
Like, don't distract yourself from it. Really let yourself feel the depths of that grief and your powerlessness and your inability to make something work that you really wanted. Like, to anyone going through this right now, this is not gonna land. To anyone who's been through it, it is such a gift to experience yourself at your lowest, and at your lowest, still being able to pick yourself back up and survive. And it really is like taking it day by day. It's spending time alone. It's spending time in the presence of really close and loving friends or family so that you are reminded of your goodness. Because during that period, it can feel like, you're nothing. You're a piece of junk, or you're powerless, or whatever the stories are that you're telling about yourself. You really need to remind yourself of the other side of the coin
Mhm.
without ignoring those. Like, you need to look at both sides of the coin. You need to experience yourself as powerless and whatever all that is, and also experience yourself as loved and powerful and held. And there's no easy way.
Yeah. The other thing I was thinking when you asked this question is, I mentioned I was so ill equipped for handling
Hmm.
that heartbreak that the length of time that the grieving process lasted was like 9 months. And then, over the course of years as I unwound more. But part of that was because we were in the gray area for so
Hmm.
long. And Everyone goes through breakups differently, but I had an acquaintance one time tell me that one of her learned, I don't know if she would call it a rule, but is no take backs. She was like, if someone breaks up with me, that's it. And I think there's, some gray area to that as well, but there is some value in being able to discern, okay, there was clarity for whoever did the breaking up in the moment when they broke up.
Hmm.
With the exception of we're in a rupture and I'm just saying, fine, blah, blah, blah. That's not clarity.
Hmm.
But when there's an actual sit down breakup conversation, someone arrived to that conversation with clarity.
Yeah.
And the truth is that when take backs are happening or reconnections are happening, they're usually happening from a place of this is so uncomfortable. And in my mind, I'm painting a picture of all of the good times or how good it felt with that person. So I'm going to do that. And then because both people are feeling that pain, there is like a wave of dopamine that comes over when you
Hmm.
reconnect. And yet, no repairs really happening. And when the clarity comes back through, whoever had the initial intuition about this not being a fit is still feeling it. And that is an uncomfortable truth to accept, but something that I didn't ever do that I think would have saved me I know would have saved me a lot of pain is after every, heartbreak, taking space and being like, I'm not dating anyone.
Hmm.
And I'm certainly not talking to the person that I just broke up with for X amount of time, which is something that we prescribe now. And I guess in some breakups, I did sort of do that, but they were the ones that I was so clear on. And in the ones where I wasn't clear on, I didn't take it, which are the ones that you needed the most, you
Yeah.
know? And so that space to yourself is essential and is definitely something we will be teaching our children and also that we teach our clients and that I would have taught that version of me as well. I wish I had someone that
Hmm.
was like sharing that wisdom with me because if something is true, then everyone can tap into that truth. And that's part of why the space is important. If we weren't us and we were a different couple and I broke up with you and that was coming from my intuition, then if you got quiet enough, you would also be able to tap into the truth that we weren't
Hmm.
meant for each other,
Totally.
And so understanding that there is singularity in what is true alignment is important because then we can come to understand that the person arriving with clarity is probably right.
Yeah, this is what I wanted to circle back to earlier of, your experience in that first heartbreak of desiring to get back with that person. And what you just said is true. When there's enough space, both individuals, even the one who didn't want that outcome, can arrive to a place of this is actually the best for all parties involved.
Mhm.
And if you broke up with someone who isn't grounded, who has a lot going on upstairs, they may never come to an agreement with you that that was the right move, even if you know that it is true deep down in your soul. So for anybody listening, it's like not a guarantee that if there's enough time and space, your ex partner is going to say, "Yeah, thank you so much. That was the best decision that you could have made for both of
Yeah, yeah,
us."
yeah.
But
Mhm.
if that person has done the work, if they understand themselves well enough, they will come to that conclusion, and it might take a long time. It might not be within a few months. It might not be within a year. And you mentioned this gray area. I call it the messy middle. And for my brothers out there, it's like the worst thing that you can do is prolong your stay in the messy middle.
Mhm.
It one tarnishes the beauty of the relationship that you had when it was in alignment because all you're going to remember is going to be that awkward and painful push and pull that happens in the messy middle instead of a season when both of you were 100% in on the relationship together. So just let it be beautiful and The messy middle might be there, not as a bug, but as a feature for a certain period of time. But it is up to you to be responsible enough not to prolong that period. So you mentioned, I'll just talk about my experience in my most recent breakup before you. It ended, and I was in that place of, I think I want to like try to make this work. She broke up with me, then a few days later came back and she said, I think I made a mistake. And there we were, like in the messy middle, because that's all I needed is that, oh, she's thinking maybe this was wrong too. And like maybe we can make this work. And it was messy, you know? We were like, without going into like too many details, we were not together, but we were acting like we were.
Mhm.
And we didn't know if we were going to give it another shot, but we were kind of acting as if nothing had happened. And so what it took was me deciding that I needed 30 days of no contact from her. And my intention was to find clarity, a yes or no decision. And within the first 3 days, I had that clarity and I had made the commitment to 30 days.
Mhm.
But it was hard because I was like, I already know this thing. I'm going to stretch this out for another 30 days.
Mhm.
But what happened during that 30 days was something that I didn't expect is that during that 30 days of no contact, I was able to access the depths of my grief and loss that would not have been possible if I had had her to reach for. If I could have sent a text or gave her a call, because that would have soothed me temporarily. It would have interrupted my dive into the deep parts of my grief, and that was really, really important.
Mhm.
And to end this story, back to your point of when there's enough space, both individuals recognize what's true. I was fortunate enough that this woman that I was with was very tapped into her spiritual practice and her devotional practice. So she was a person that could arrive at that truth. And at the end of the 30 days, we had a conversation. And within the first 10 seconds of that conversation, we both shared what we thought that we should do. And we were in agreement that this was the best thing that we end that relationship.
I was thinking of this question, so I'm glad you went into your most recent breakup. Is, the difference of the wisdom that you knew in that one versus the first, high school experiences that you were talking about. And this share of, no, I needed clarity. And this links back to a teaching that we talked about on this podcast before in Alexander's episode, where confusion is not a state of being. There isn't a maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't.
Mhm.
You know if you're meant to be with this person or not. And if you know that you're meant to be with this person, then there's a certain type of behavior that exists when there is rupture because there is trust and truth. And when your system knows that you're not meant to be with this person and yet you're terrified that that's the truth, you'll create the story of confusion. You will attach and attack the relationship or the person or yourself. But when it is truly the thing, there's no need to attach or attack because there's trust that it's the thing. And so there isn't really this back and forth. There's like a release of, okay, maybe this needs some time,
Mhm.
you know? And there is a different type of stability versus grieving or argument or messy middle because that doesn't need to exist where there is a true yes. But the reality is that this messy middle pretty much only exists when someone or both people know that it's a no and they don't like it. They don't like that it's a no. They
Mhm.
they wish that it was different. And a really valuable teaching that you taught me is the relationship you had is never coming back.
Mhm.
Even if there is a magical repair and you are one of the few who gets back together and lasts forever after a breakup, which is an almost never situation, but does happen.
Mhm.
The truth is that the relationship you had is gone. And so there is an essential grieving that must happen because when we're in that state of discomfort and not wanting to feel our pain and not wanting to admit the places that we failed the relationship and not wanting to feel the way that we feel abandoned or unworthy or whatever. We fantasize about the good times and probably make them a little bit better in our mind than we actually appreciated them in the moment. But if only I could get that back. I've had people say this to me that I broke up with. If only we could get back to that place. Why can't we get back to that place? It's like, it's gone. No matter what, even if we were to start again, that place is gone.
Yeah. When somebody says those words, we're done, or I can't do this anymore, believe them.
Mhm.
They have painfully got themselves to a place where they can speak that out loud. And when they say we are done, you are done. The relationship that you had was not working. It
Mhm.
was not working for that person to the point that they ended it. When they say, I can't do this anymore, they can't do this anymore. The way that you've been relating to each other, they can no longer tolerate. So, in those rare scenarios where two people get back together, one, the space needs to happen, the 30 days, the 60 days, whatever it is. Each person needs to be committed to doing the work on themselves for themselves, not for a chance of getting that relationship back.
Mhm.
And then, if without force, the two of you cross paths again and feel resonant in a new way, it does not echo or ring of the relationship that you had, then maybe there's a chance of exploring that relationship like it's a new one. You know, the two of you aren't back in bed with each other within the first week.
Mhm.
You are like courting each other and
Mhm.
getting to know these new people, like cautiously, you know? Are you actually different, or are you the person that I said I can't be with you anymore?
Yeah, something that I really admire about something that I've witnessed in one of our dear friends who was feeling like their relationship was fading is the amount of intention that she had in the disillusion process and in the reconnection process. It was like there was no abrupt, oh, I'm feeling this, so it's done.
Mhm.
She really sat with herself and her own processes. And also, there was like deep discernment about, oh, maybe this actually could be something that I didn't think it could be.
Mm.
And in my experience of getting back with partners that I had previously broken up with, there's the first heartbreak that I talked about, and then there's most recent heartbreak. And I'd certainly handled the most recent relationship significantly differently than that first very tumultuous heartbreak. But in the reconnection process that I had in the most recent relationship before you, even though there was a good amount of space taken and we did go through like some exercises of do we want the same things, there wasn't this deep, like ceremonious internal dialogue with myself because I didn't have those tools yet of if I'm brutally honest with myself and willing to hear what I don't want to hear, is this truly a yes or is it truly a no? And that, caution of potentially getting back together is important. It's like, unless it is, yes, absolutely. I trust myself so much to show up differently this time. And I trust this other person with my life to show up differently this time. And pretty much 9 out of 10 times it will be no, you know, because part of the reason that the relationship's dissolving is because someone's on a path that the other person isn't. And in both that first heartbreak and my most recent one before you, the reunion is what created the level of intensity of the grieving in the end. Like, if I had
Mhm.
just been able to accept the person's breakup with me that first time around, we wouldn't have had any of the toxicity or any of the fighting or any of that feeling of like dying over and over and
Mhm.
over again. It would have been painful, but the relationship itself would have been just perceived as beautiful with definitely some fighting here and there because that's the level of consciousness I was at the time. But the depth of pain and like emotional abuse that occurred was all in that messy middle part.
Mhm. Yes. I'm thinking of a quote that pain is inevitable and suffering is optional. We
Mhm.
choose our suffering.
Mhm.
And chances are that if you're entering that messy middle, prolonging that gray area, that you are placing greater suffering down like ahead on your path.
Well, I share with people often about, like anxiety or any emotional discomfort. It's like you can either feel it now, or the choice to not feel it now is the choice to feel it in a prolonged fashion over time forever until you choose to feel it all, which could be the rest of your life. If I were to have stayed in that relationship that was awful in the end, like that would have been choosing to be in that tumultuous place forever. And it would have felt quote unquote more comfortable because I had this person, but ultimately we weren't a good fit. So that would have been a choice to be uncomfortable for the rest of my life.
Mhm,
And the same goes for any other emotions. You can feel to the depth of your grief like you did for that 30 days, or you can feel the discomfort of not being sure for a prolonged period of time and likely would have ended anyways.
mhm,
And for me, in the more recent heartache that I was alluding to, it's like that first breakup was painful, but the reason that the true ending breakup was so painful is because our lives were so much more tied together and we had envisioned so much more of our life
mhm,
together.
mhm,
And like we were married, so there's also like a lot of legal things that had to happen, and not a lot of legal things, I guess, like one. But I'm lucky that it was a cordial breakup, but not everyone has that. And it's like the longer you stay, the more ties there are to unwind emotionally and physically and energetically. And it really is like if you can trust that first instinct that it's not right, the pain is really saved. And I think that's something that's so hard to express is until people experience it, is this true knowing that like when it always gets said. And like that specific relationship that I had, it's like we thought we knew, but also if I was being honest with myself, there were clear signs in my body that were a no, versus in our relationship, it's like I know. And I occasionally have sensations in my body that feel scary, but I know that they're fear. There is just a difference. Like I know that it's a fear and I know what the truth is. And that feels scary to verbalize on this podcast and it feels scary to verbalize to you. But the knowing feels a lot different when I'm writing a story about knowing versus when I'm tapped into the frequency of truth.
mhm. Yeah. And that's why it's so important to choose a partner who is devoted to truth, who is doing the work on themselves to tune their instrument, to clean their channel, to tap into the authentic voice of creation and not the voice of their trauma or conditioning. Because when you choose that person, you can trust their instincts.
Mhm.
In my last breakup, she came to me and she said, I need to end this. Like, you need to leave. And when she said that, we were in Portugal on a trip at the time with like a week left of the trip. So I did feel like I needed to salvage it at some rate. But when she said that, I was like, "Oh shit. This isn't like something for me to convince her out of. Like she like is really feeling this at her core. This isn't like an impulse that she's saying this out loud. It's not cuz we're in a fight. This is coming from somewhere deeper." And at my deepest level, I knew that that was true as well. You know, if you're with someone who's not grounded, who hasn't done the work, right? That may be a trauma response that you do need to help them reason out of that it
Yeah.
actually is the right decision
Mhm.
to stay. But that's, kind of I don't want to say like that's like a pragmatic benefit of choosing partners who are tapped in is because when they know, and you can trust them, and you don't have to be in this maybe stage exaggerating your suffering.
Mhm. This is why the teaching of love yourself first before you love someone else, because it isn't just about like pop culture self-love. It's like if you don't trust your own discernment, then you are not going to resonate a partner to you who trusts themselves, but also you will be incapable of trusting them. And you definitely don't want to trust them more than you trust yourself. But if I can trust you and I also trust myself, then we have some chances to walk down some messy roads together. And there is definitely value in like learning some of these skills before getting into relationships, or at least if you're already
Mhm.
in relationships, starting to learn,
Mhm.
because that self trust is really coupled with self love. If you can't trust yourself, then I don't really feel that that love can possibly be there, you know? Otherwise, there will always be criticism about your decisions. But really learning what it feels like in your body to feel truth and to feel trust and to feel connection in your own being is what allows for that connection with someone else. And you're mentioning like, this benefit of being with someone who is also doing this work and who trusts themselves. And if they're functioning from a trauma response, maybe you can't trust their discernment about leaving the relationship. But
Mhm.
I would counter that with, can you trust their discernment of being in the relationship then?
Right.
It's really two sides of the same coin. Like if someone can't be honest with themselves, or they can't stand in their truth, or they are unable to set boundaries, or all of these characteristics that are kind of required for someone to show up as truly them, then the relationship itself is kind of untrustworthy at its core.
Mhm.
Because who am I in love with? Am
Yeah.
I in love with you or your mask? Are you in love with me or your mask? Am I just liking who I feel like with you? Or are you actually bringing out versions of me that I'm growing
Yeah.
into? It's very confusing.
Yeah. That's why it's so important to be doing or have done the work upon entering a relationship. Like, none of us are gonna get it perfect, and I've entered relationships without having done the work upfront, and it didn't end well. It ended in a lot of pain, and we're all gonna do it. But those relationships where you are presenting a version of yourself that you think your desired partner is going to like
Mhm,
or go on a date with, those relationships are doomed from the very beginning because eventually you are going to be found out.
mhm.
And so when a guy develops a crush on a woman because he's physically attracted to her and he decides what he thinks that she's going to like instead of just showing up as himself and seeing if she likes him or not, it doesn't work.
Mhm,
You might get the date. You might have sex with this person. You might have a month, 2-month fling. God forbid you have a year relationship with this person because the longer that you're in it, the more pain that it's going to cause. So, the proxy is not, can I present myself in a way that this person is going to like? The process is when I show up authentically as who I am and they like that, we've got a shot, or they don't like that, great. That
mhm,
person is removed from my dating pool. I have a smaller pool of people to wade through until I find my woman that is my destiny.
mhm. Yeah, I'm thinking as you're talking of people confuse being with someone as being worthy.
Mhm.
It's like, "Oh, if this person doesn't wanna be with me, I'm unworthy." You're just not an energetic match, period. Like, there are
Mhm.
so many stories that we write about who we are and what we're worth and who we're with and what they're worth. But the reality is that everything in our life is an energetic match for us.
Mhm.
And people love that when it means they're reading The Secret and it's talking about manifesting all of these good things. And they hate it when it's talking about the bad stuff.
Mhm.
But the fact is that if something's in your life, you're an energetic match for it. And if it's leaving your life, you're no longer an energetic match, which means that your paths are just diverging. I used this imagery with one of my clients of like, we all are flowing down our own riverbed. And sometimes our rivers come together. And usually rivers that come together then are also going to split and go their separate ways. One becomes a waterfall, one becomes a creek. Like whatever. But sometimes, occasionally, rivers stay and they get to be unified as one and all the way to the ocean into unity forever.
Mhm.
But that isn't always the case. And if we can just view life as this natural, like shamanic life, death, rebirth, redeath, rebirth, redeath, and understand that something is or isn't an energetic match for me and it has nothing to do with my value, then it takes away some of the emotional states.
Yeah.
And also, if you are admiring someone and there isn't resonance, then, who do I need to be to resonate that to me? It's not about changing who you are at your core. It's about embodying certain aspects of yourself that you obviously desire to embody. Otherwise, you wouldn't admire them in the other person. And so, taking out the stories of I was left because I'm not lovable or I was left because I'm unworthy. It's okay to feel those things.
Mhm.
And those things are road signs guiding you towards like, okay, well, how do I have more self-worth? How do I have
Yeah.
more self-respect? How do I have more love? Obviously, these things are not necessarily showing me the things those other people hate about me or whatever story I'm writing, but are showing me what I don't like about myself yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you said about asking ourselves the question of how do I become resonant with that which I desire in my life?
Mhm,
And it's not changing who you are for a woman or for a person that you desire.
mhm,
That's faking it. And you cannot fake a frequency. You must change for you. You can't change for something because there are no roots there. There is nothing for that to ground into, and you will slip and the mask will fall and you will be found out. But if you change who you are because you love yourself, not because you're seeking love outside of yourself, you will naturally attract more love. You will be an energetic match for your woman or
mhm,
for your person. And we're an energetic match for different people at different points in our lives, right? It's like
mhm,
everybody that I was with before you, I was an energetic match for them at that time. And you also spoke about the shamanic path. And the reality is that every relationship that we are in will end either in a breakup or in death. 95% of them in a breakup.
mhm,
And, I used to measure the success of my relationships of if it was going to end in marriage or
mhm,
not. And if it wasn't ending in marriage, then I failed. And that's one reason why I've been engaged before and it didn't work out because I was like, I have to make this relationship successful. And this is the only way to do it. And so it can be really helpful as you're navigating this journey of romantic love to change your success metric on
mhm,
what makes a relationship successful is, did I learn how to love better? Did I learn more about myself?
mhm.
How did I handle myself through the breakup? Yeah.
I was similar to what you're saying, I was going to add, did I show up with grace?
Mhm.
Because it really feels like that gray area that we're talking. It's like during those breakups where it was tumultuous, like zero grace on my
Mhm.
end, on their end too, but you know, our process is about our own evolution and really acknowledging like I did not leave that relationship gracefully, you
Mhm.
know? And what if I could? Like what if I could love the person across from me so much that when they tell me I'm not for them, I respond with, "Wow, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for saving us years of being in connection that wasn't meant to be. Thank you for leaving and creating space for me for the person
Yeah.
who is meant to be. Thank you for loving yourself enough that you create the space for whoever is meant to be in this spot for
Yeah.
you next." And it really becomes clear as you go through this process, like what we're all calling love isn't. Not to say that there wasn't love in the relationships that I had, but in the end, where I was still calling it love, it was not love. It was definitely attachment and fear.
Mhm.
And those things are different. When we're functioning from attachment and fear, there's way more fighting. There's way more like trauma sex, There's
Yeah.
way more like battling for the other person to understand who we are and denying that things are wrong. But when we remove ourselves gracefully from things that are no longer for us, we get to, like we've been saying the whole time, honor the relationship for what it was. And also, this is the part that people don't understand or forget when they're in those spaces, that any removal of anything is creating space for something new.
Mhm.
And really learning to trust that if someone is seeing themselves out, it is because there is something new waiting for you just on the other side of the door. And it feels scary because we can't see the other side of the door until we walk through it. But we can't walk through the door with an elephant behind us. It won't fit. And that feels really important, like what you're saying, changing our measurement for success of this relationship. Like, did I move through it gracefully while it was aligned? And did I release it gracefully while it wasn't aligned? The saying or the teaching that came through for me after my last breakup was, let the love be what it wants.
Mhm.
If the love does not want to be in this close of proximity anymore, then release it. And then maybe you actually do still get to love this person just from a different angle.
Yeah. Yeah, that question of did I move through this relationship with grace and did I exit gracefully is one that I got to have a really beautiful experience of firsthand. And in my most recent breakup, we had actually broken up like a year before that too. And in that first breakup, my response, I was like kicking and screaming. I was like, no, like this can't be done. I was desperate to get her back. And we got back together and we were together for a year and it's really beautiful. And then she chose to end it again. And that time, my response to that breakup was night and day. And it's rare that we get to experience ourselves in the same circumstances at different times of our life. It was the same person, it was a breakup. And that second time, before she came back 5 days later and said, I think I made a mistake. And we entered the messy middle. But on that initial breakup, she walked into my house and she said that it was over. And we didn't get mad at each other. We didn't blame each other. I asked if it was for a reason or if it was just for a feeling. And she said it was just for a feeling. I said, I know what you mean because I ended something before you in that way. And we got pho and we hung out for like 6 hours. Like I cried, she cried, and she left. There was no like breakup sex and it was so pure and so clean and it flipped on its head the belief that a breakup has to end in nastiness and shouting and meanness and blame. And man, if anybody out there, if that experience is accessible to you, it was seriously one of the most beautiful experiences of my life and it happened. So I say that because it is possible and it's incredibly healing.
Yeah, there's one breakup that I had. The most recent breakup that I had was as graceful, I think, as it could have been. But there was one breakup that I had that just we had a similar, like, I don't know, like, last experience together where it was just, like, so honoring of each other, and people create this desire for, like, closure. If only I can say this one thing, then I'll feel better. Or if only this person expresses this thing to me, then maybe we can get back together. And I think that that puts us in a challenging position because then we're always seeking this closure. But the trick of this desire for closure is that actually what everyone is desiring from closure is reunion. And if only the right thing will be said, then we'll feel better. But it's a trick of the attachment. It is the story of the unworthiness wound. You know, it's a story of the attachment wound where I need to be able to say this other thing so this person understands me.
Mhm.
Or I need the other person to say this thing so that to say sorry so that I feel better. But it's like closure doesn't come from words,
Mhm.
you know? And there's no amount of closure that's going to get rid of the grief. Like you had that experience and still there was much grief to be grieved. And I had this experience with that woman, and still there was much grief to be grieved. And so that is an important truth to just accept. There's no amount of closure from either side that's going to get rid of the discomfort you're feeling. But you can have a beautiful experience if you ask yourself, like, in what way do I respond to this breakup that honors the love that was had and that allows it to end gracefully rather than tumultuously?
Yeah. That belief that if I say this thing or I hear this thing from them, I'm going to have closure is false. Like you said, it doesn't come from words. At closure, ultimately, after you have grieved and learned, is a choice
Mhm.
to close that door and create space in your life for the new to come in. And I talked earlier about the 30 days that I took for myself, and I felt a lot of grief and loss. And I was like, wow, I did really good in that 30 days. Like, I felt a lot of stuff. And that wasn't all of it,
Mhm.
like months later, I had this ceremony where I went through photos and letters, and there was so much more. And that was a year later. That was while we were together. And so don't listen to this and think, okay, if I really go into it for 30 days, that'll be it. Like, grief comes in waves. And if you've got a box in your closet with memories in it, like I did, you need to go through it at some point and decide what you want to keep and what you want to get rid of and feel all the feelings that come with it. And once you do that, then closure becomes a choice. Yeah.
In my most recent breakup before you, I learned a lot about grief. Something that has been true on this path for me is that as I have become less dissociated and learned more tools, the emotional states that I go through are not easier. like,
Hmm.
because I'm realizing how much I feel, and they're easier in a way that I have tools to hold myself, but the amount that I feel is much more than I was feeling before. And there's this quote that you taught me. Is it a 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞 quote? It's not about
It's not about feeling better, it's
it's
about
about
getting
getting
better
better
at
at
feeling.
feeling, right. And so the amount of grief that I felt over the past year plus was more than I have ever felt, despite that first heartbreak being all about, like, feeling like I was gonna die.
Yeah.
Um, but I think that the feeling that I was gonna die was just a sign of my inability to actually feel the grief. And so being able to feel the grief this time
Mm,
around really taught me how long grief lasts. And I can feel to the bottom of my fear. I can feel to the bottom of my guilt or my shame, but I really can't feel to the bottom of my grief because when something's lost, there's no resolution. And that 30 days that you had when you did the ceremony, I think it was maybe like 6 plus months after, maybe 9 months,
Probably 9 months.
9
Yeah.
months, but it was such a sweet experience to witness of yours because I had been kind of like moving through waves of grief the whole time. Because of where I was, you were so stably holding the stability in the room.
Hmm.
And then it seemed that finally there was space, for you to feel more of your stuff. And it came as a shock to you,
Mm,
that there was so much there.
yeah.
And that's why this episode is so important because I think most people think that they are done grieving, and most people aren't, because the people that have actually felt to most of their grief will tell you this. I'll probably be feeling some of this forever,
Hmm.
in some way, shape, or
Yeah.
form. And that first year is quite significant, and there is a lot in the first couple of weeks, couple of months, but then, 6 months is a big marker and a year is a big marker because there are seasons of life that you have lived through, especially with someone that you've been with for at least a year. There are seasons of life that you have lived through with that person. And the only thing that's going to dig up that grief are those same seasons, those same holidays, those same
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. And that feeling of I'm going to be feeling some of this forever is honoring the beauty of the love that you shared And it's really important to choose a next partner who understands that, who allows space for that. And you and I are in union, and we've been talking all about our exes on this podcast. And there's a stigma within relationship that, okay, I'm in a relationship with this new person and we can never talk about our exes. And it is so important that you talk about your exes, that you understand the wounds that happened in those previous relationships, that you understand the sore spots that happened in those previous relationships, because I don't want you to touch those spots. It's like you're not responsible for them, but it's great if you can kind of care for them instead of deepening them or putting salt in them. And also to share the lessons that you learned from your exes. I think it's a big mistake for partners to have a gag order on talking about their exes.
Mhm. The very first red flag that I felt about that ex that I was sharing about, for my first breakup is that he would not talk to me about his ex-partner. And I was like, "That's so weird." Like, you loved that person. They made you in some senses who you are, and you don't wanna talk about them at all. And, that was just a sign of the way that he processed things in
Yeah.
general, but it was truly the first red flag,
Yeah.
and I think that that's really an important thing to understand. It's like we are, to circle back to where we started, the amalgamation of every experience we've ever had, every person we've ever loved or who has loved us. And the way to truly heal from things is to honor them.
hmm Yeah, and one way you can tell if you're truly healed from something is if you can speak about it without an emotional charge. You can speak about it with love. And my guess is that that first breakup that you had, the reason that he wouldn't speak about his past partner is because he hadn't processed everything or he hadn't taken
Anything.
responsibility for his part in that. And, an edgy first date question for those people dating out there is like, okay, when was your last relationship?
Mhm.
Okay. How did it end? And like, what did you contribute to the ending of that? Right. Because if someone answers that question and it's only blame and it's only their fault, man, that person has a lot more work to do before they enter into a relationship. And it's probably not with you.
Mhm. Yeah, and maybe one of the last things I'll share is there's a difference between not having an emotional charge and not having emotion. Like if I really tap into any of the heartbreaks that I've had or any of the traumas that I've had right now, if I really paused for, I don't know, a few minutes, 10 minutes, I'd probably cry about any of them. You
hmm
know, I feel heartbreak thinking of any of the names of the people that I've really loved before you. And even as I'm talking, it's like I can kind of feel tears rising, but I don't feel like upset or angry. I don't feel shame. I don't feel guilt about any of those things. I just feel like sad,
hmm
you know? And that sadness, I don't even know if that's really quite the right name
hmm
for the emotion. We need the emotion wheel, I think. But it's this sense of like the words that I will often use is like beautiful tragedy. Like,
hmm
what a gift that I had those people in my life, even for a moment, and what a loss that
hmm
I don't get to celebrate them anymore. So it's not that there can't be any emotion, but it's that, even as I'm talking, like I'm sure anyone listening can hear like the softness in my voice and the gentleness in my voice as I'm talking about them, and that resonates much differently than if there was like still anger stored somewhere or sadness or guilt or shame, that was unprocessed
Yeah.
versus this state of I've really sat with these things and I've processed them and I honor them and I'm able to like genuinely in every cell of my body wish the best for all of them.
Yeah. They're all a tragedy.
Mhm.
All of my notable breakups were a tragedy and they will be tragic forever because in my limited human awareness, I wanted those relationships to work so bad.
Mhm.
I wanted them to be the one.
Mhm.
And in the divine design, far beyond my intelligence, they weren't the forever. energetic match, no matter how hard I tried or how bad I wanted it,
Mhm.
it was not my path. And that's what's tragic about it,
Mhm.
is because I didn't have the power
Mhm.
to make those things work. It was beyond me. And the person that anybody's going to be with forever, that is their energetic match, that is their destined partner, you can't control it.
Mhm. Yeah, there's this saying of like right person, wrong time.
Hmm.
And a hill I will die on is that the right person does not come at the wrong time.
Hmm.
The right person only comes at the right time
Hmm.
because that's what makes them the right person.
Hmm.
And if it's the right person in the wrong time, then they can't possibly be the right person because they're showing up at the wrong time. And one of the processes that I had to make my way through with that first love that I had specifically, and also the woman that I dated that I was mentioning is, if only I had known what I know now, then I could have shown up differently and they would have
Right.
been less tumultuous. And there would have been, at the very least, more grace in the disillusion of them. But likely they would have worked because I know their hearts. But the truth is that the only way that I got to this point of what I know now is by mending myself after those heartbreaks
Yeah.
because they were the catalyst to the growth that got me here to be able to show up for you the way that I show up for you in this relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And that alleviates some of that heaviness from tragedies. And another reason people get so stuck in the tragedy is this romantic and beautiful idea that, but they were my soulmate.
Mm,
They were my one person.
mm,
And I've come to the belief that I don't know if soulmate is the perfect word for it, but it's a word that gets used a lot. I've come to believe that we don't just have one soulmate that will eventually die with, that we have a few. We have a soulmate for a season that's there to help us end karmic cycles, to learn lessons about ourselves that are actually preparing us for the next great love. And we'll have a few great loves in our life. There's like some mob movie, like gangster movie, and one of the famous quotes from it is like, every man has three great loves in
mm,
his life. And the guy who's narrating it's like, my first one, I was 6 years old, and we rode our tricycles together. And, and just releasing the grip a little bit that, yeah, she might have been perfect for you for that season. And now it's over. And there's going to be another one
mm,
that's going to be perfect for you because as you change, as you grow, so will your frequency, so will what's an energetic match for you. Some things fall out of resonance and greater things fall into it. So understanding that it's not just this one person, is that we will love a few people or many people romantically and deeply throughout our lives. And it's just like an important frame to understand.
mhm. There is something that I'll share with clients who are grieving partnerships where, I mean, I've told this story too, where I'm like, if it didn't last, then it wasn't love, you know? Or the flip side that will be shared by some is this was true love. It has to be the thing. They must be coming back.
Hmm.
And it's similar to what you're saying. It's like the love is true while you're in it, but there is, we can always love better.
Hmm.
And it's likely that the environment of the relationships that are lost can't hold the love that we're growing into. And that's, I mean, I don't even know if likely is the right word. It feels like that's the truth. If we're growing into a new iteration of love and it's too big for this glass house, the glass house is going to shatter so that I can have a castle.
Hmm.
And really learning to trust the evolution of life is something that can only happen through life lived. And yet, when we try to grip onto something that's broken, all we get are cuts and scrapes all over our body, but we could walk across the street and there's a brand new home for us. And so it's not that the love wasn't true.
Yeah.
The love was true until it wanted to be something different. And then the love may still be true, but it doesn't fit in that orientation of partnership anymore.
Yeah.
And also just because the love was deep and the love was the best love you've ever had till that point doesn't mean that it's the one that's eternal. When I had my most recent breakup and fell in love with you, I had this imagery of a bridge, and it's like that last love I had was so special because it was like the only place I'd ever really felt safe and the only place that certain parts of me had ever really been met. And it was so sacred.
Hmm.
And that's why we both clung to it for so long, because it was way better than anything it felt like it must have been the thing.
Yeah.
And yet there were clear signs that it was falling away because we were both meant to go to this other place on the other side of the bridge, not meant to stay on the bridge forever.
Hmm.
And so there is a deep trust that needs to be accepted by everyone standing on this bridge that this is just a bridge and the bridge is now deteriorating. And there is something for me on the other side of this bridge, but I only get to experience it if I keep walking.
Hmm. People do a really fucked up thing when they have beautiful experiences, transcendent experiences, paradigm shifting experiences, whether it's a retreat, whether it's plant medicine ceremony, whether it's deep experience at a yoga class, or whether it's a beautiful romantic relationship, is that they talk themselves out of the beauty that they experienced. Days later, or weeks later, or months later, they say, yeah, that thing happened and it was nice, but the feeling that I felt at that time wasn't real. It was imagination, or it was a trick of my mind. And that happens in romantic relationships too. People want to roll around in the glass and they want to say that nothing that existed in the past year, 2 years, 4 years was true and real.
Mhm.
I had an experience when my engagement ended. She brought out a bunch of letters that I had written her, and she was like, read those. And I read them. And she said, was any of that true? And she couldn't believe that any of what I wrote was true. And I said, yeah, like it was true. When I wrote it, it was true. So it's true now. And just because this relationship has fallen out of resonance doesn't mean that I've stopped loving you.
Mhm.
And that didn't make it any easier for her at
Mhm.
all,
Mhm.
you know? And I don't think at the time that she was able to resolve that false conflict that the relationship is ending and he also loves me. I
Mhm.
don't think she could do that, and I don't think a lot of people can do that, and that's one way that people let the beauty that was slip through their fingers, and you haven't done that.
This is, two sides of the same coin, like I'm mentioning, where people are either falling on one side or the other. And the resolution of the paradox is really important that both are true. It's like this was a beautiful glass house with every time the sun would shine through, there was rainbows everywhere. Like we could see each other in the reflections. We could see out into the sunset. It was a beautiful glass house. And there are shards of glass everywhere now.
Mhm,
Both are true. And the glass cannot be put back together. And
mhm,
people are either saying the house never existed or the shattered glass doesn't exist. But you must accept, in order to get to the other side of this heartbreak, you must accept that both are true. And it's in that acceptance where the honoring, the grace, the
mhm.
compassion for yourself, the relationship, and the other person all come through.
Yeah. I always say the ability to tolerate paradox is spiritual maturity, and being able to navigate a breakup with grace, being able to know your yes or your no and not live in that messy middle. It requires spiritual maturity. And if you're doing that, it's a sign that your spiritual development is progressing.
The last thing I'll say, which I said like 15 minutes ago, but this is true now, is that in this process of breakups, something that I want to offer now, in the presence of our love is that, and also some things do last,
Mhm.
you know? And to me and my body, it feels scary to say things about our love as broadcast because I want to keep it sacred, you know?
They know.
They know. I know. I know. But it's like most things don't last. And that's their beauty,
Mhm.
that they're only for a time. And some things do. And that's what makes us, I think, desire this eternal love so much is because there's like an innate knowing internally in everyone that things that last forever are really sacred for sure, because it's so unlikely. And because most things don't last forever, it's what makes those momentary things sacred for the moments that they're present,
Mhm.
because they likely aren't going to last forever. And so allowing ourselves to honor like the things that are short lived for also being sacred.
Mhm.
Because what a gift that even though we weren't that person's forever person, we got to experience them for a moment and they got to experience us for a moment. And even this love won't last forever because it will have different iterations,
Right.
and something that's unique about our connection that will be in a later podcast where we talk about our love specifically is we know that we get to live and die every death together. And so I think I just want to end with that truth that like actually no relationship lasts
Right.
forever. Even the one where our physical bodies are together forever, each iteration is different.
Mhm.
And so this thing that we've been told that something lasts forever
Mhm.
needs to really be released
Yeah.
no matter what.
Yeah. The attachment that a relationship is going to remain the same is actually what will defeat that relationship and ensure that it can't flourish long term. But just like you said, the acceptance that there will be seasons of our relationship and things will change and you will change and I will change and time again we will return to each other again in new resonance at a new frequency is what ensures the long term nature and that commitment, like you mentioned, to live and die every death together.
Homework, integration work.
Homework.
I'm thinking that there's two options, or people can do both. But one is to sit with past relationships and consider what did I bring to the dissolution of that relationship?
Hmm.
And how could I have brought more grace to that relationship, whether it be in the life of it or the death of it?
Hmm.
That's
Yeah,
part one.
great. Part one. And part two is to do this flip side of the coin exercise. You brought through a great analogy of the glass house of okay, your relationship was a glass house. And at one point there were rainbows coming through and we could see reflections of each other. And I could see you up in the shower upstairs. And you could see me down in the kitchen making breakfast. It was really beautiful. So writing down like, okay, what were the tremendously beautiful things in that relationship that held you and helped you grow and influenced you, and the flip side of that coin is the glass house like isn't there anymore.
Yeah. What are the shards?
It's shattered. Like, what are the shards? What was the pain? What really hurt? Where were you powerless? And clear some time for this because it's not going to be fun. You might not want to pop bottles after you do it.
Any last words about breakups?
No, make sure you follow the show, leave a rating and a review. We'd love to hear from you if this episode resonated, if you have experiences that you are unpacking or want to share with us, or you have questions, please email us. It's one of our intentions to not just speak to you and share with you, but to engage with you and have a relationship with you as the audience. So please email us. It's contact@thewellworshipedman.com. All right. Love you. See you
Love
on the next
you.
one.